McWhorter, President and CEO of the Executives Club of Chicago. I want to thank you for joining the Executives Club and World Business Chicago today for the unveiling of World Business Chicago's Chicago 2050, a plan for economic growth and jobs. As we were putting this program together, our team got a preview of the Chicago 2050 report. And I'll say, to borrow a few words from the report, I found it to be bold, transformative, and visionary. It's data rich and dynamic with clear and actionable goals. And it's very much in line with the Executives Club mission to challenge, inspire, and activate leaders to shape business and our world. And at the club, we don't see Chicago 2050 as a narrative about the future of the city. We see it as a call to action to help build it. So that doesn't mean it'll be easy, but as I like to remind people, Chicagoans, we're built to do hard things. I mean, we reversed the course of the Chicago River, right? So, not that any of us did that, but we shout out to those who did. So, through strong civic engagement and public private partnerships, business leaders must lean into our role in shaping Chicago for the next 5, 10, 25 years and beyond. I want to extend a major thank you to our partners, World Business Chicago, for their leadership on Chicago 2050 and for their partnership in hosting today's unveiling. It really is an amazing body of work. I also want to thank our amazing partners at Fifth Third for their sponsorship and support of today's program. So with that, I'll turn it over to my friend, Rob McGee, who's the Fifth Third Senior Vice President sorry, Rob, I always mess your beautiful long title. Fifth Third Senior Vice President and Community Impact Territory Manager. So clean up anything I messed up, Rob, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dory, and good afternoon, everyone. As Dory mentioned, I am Rob McGee, Senior Vice President and Community Impact Territory Manager here at Fifth Third Bank. And I want to welcome you all to Chicago 2050, Building the City of the Future. Today, we gather to explore a bold and forward-thinking blueprint for Chicago's long-term economic growth and global competitiveness over the next 25 years, along with the strategic path that will guide us toward that vision. It's a vision that also aligns deeply with Fifth Third's enduring commitment to the city. Fifth Third Bank is proud to have served the Chicago market for over 20 years. And as part of that financial institution with a nearly 170-year legacy, we bring both stability and innovation to our work. Our presence here is not transactional, it is transformational. We are deeply invested in the long-term success of the city of Chicago. From startups and scale-ups to place-based investments and legacy enterprises. We understand that the building of the city of the future requires more than just capital. It requires collaboration, insight, and a shared commitment to inclusive growth. That's why we continue to support initiatives that strengthen Chicago's economic infrastructure, such as financing small business expansion, investing in workforce development and talent pipelines, backing affordable housing and commercial revitalization projects, championing financial empowerment and equity across all communities. And as we look at our work with organizations like World Business Chicago and the Executives Clubs, we reflect on our beliefs that Chicago's future is a shared enterprise, one that thrives when public, private, and civic sectors align around bold ideals and measurable outcomes and impacts. And as we look ahead for the next 25 years, Fifth Third is here for the long haul, committed to being a strategic partner in building a more resilient, competitive, and inclusive Chicago. And joining us today in an inspiring lineup of leaders shaping Chicago's economic future, we have Phil Clement, President and CEO of World Business Chicago. He's also joined by Charles Smith, Vice Chair of World Business Chicago and founder and CEO of CS Insurance Strategies, Inc., a division of MMA, and Hannah Loftus, Vice President of Research at World Business Chicago, who will provide a data-driven look at the trends and opportunities fueling the Chicago 2050 blueprint. And moderating, of course, today's conversation is Dory McWhorter, President and CEO of the Executives Club of Chicago. I will turn it over to Dory.
Thank you, Rob. And Phil, I'll turn it over to you to kick us off and get us started and dive into Chicago 2050.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. First of all, to the Executives Club, you definitely do challenge, inspire, and activate. And that's why we wanted to bring this conversation to the the wide net that you cast of bringing civic engagement for Chicago. So thank you for that. And Rob, you also mentioned that notion of inspiration. Usually at an executives club luncheon, we are actually eating lunch. And I am going to point out that today here at WBC, we had Manny's brought in. For those of you who don't know the civic bravery that they're doing, they're amazing. So feel free to order enough that you have to put some in the freezer because we want to support these great Chicago companies right now. Um, you know, it's kind of amazing that a book that was written in the late 1800s about a period in the late 1700s captures this moment in time so well. It is the best of times and it is the worst of times. And we are trying to balance these two worlds constantly. A joke I hear, which I love often, is it would be great to just live in precedented times. We don't hear of that being referenced much. I go to a lot of economic presentations in my work, and you can imagine that people are saying literally at the end of presentations things like, there's a 45% chance that everything I've said won't come true. Or my favorite just last week was, really, you should probably listen to anyone else because I got the last 2 years completely wrong. And it's just a hard time to figure out what's going on. There's heartache, but there's also, in the words of your charter, a lot of inspiration out there. What I would say is this story was never more on alert than a couple of weeks ago at the Chicago Marathon. So we had 50,000 people coming off of O'Hare, hitting the streets of Chicago, staying in our hotels, eating in our restaurants without incident. Everything went perfectly. If a runner stumbled, the neighbors helped pick him up. They served them water. It was a fantastic story for the city, a global story. But if you looked at what was being said about us on social media, there was a different story being said. This is part of why it's important to have an articulated growth strategy for us. We started working on this a while back, realizing that there's positive and negative, but what people really needed was a fact-based conversation about our economy. And we had over 300 executives that got involved and at different levels of this planning, many roundtables, some of them involving the mayor, et cetera, and having a robust dialogue around how we could grow Chicago. This team believes that there are very few problems that growth and responsible growth with a lens on equity won't solve for this city. We are all about grow, grow, grow. And really the first step of any strategy is to identify your strengths. So I do know that we are living in complicated times, but please allow me to present a view that shows that Chicago is winning more than it's losing. We certainly have both every day, and that the fundamentals are strong, and there's something that we can feel a lot of confidence in, that we can build a strong and robust economy. I'll also take a moment to mention that in our planning, it was important for us to embrace what's happened before us. This is a refresh of a plan that was made in 2012. And we brought most of the organizations and many of the same people to work on this plan now. So to revisit it, there were a lot of things that just weren't mentioned. AI, certainly quantum, these were not issues people were thinking about. And I think there was also the notion at that time a little bit more that rising tides would lift all ships. And so a keener eye on equity and things of that nature have also been a part of this effort. But some things that you might find surprising, depending on how close you are to the Chicago story. And I'll tell you one that a lot of people find surprising as I start to talk to them about this topic is Chicago is the #1 place for corporate relocations and expansions in the country. There's an organization called Site Selection, which audits these numbers, tracks it for the industry, et cetera. And they use very quantitative formula all about jobs and square footage. And every year they publish in their magazine the rankings. And Chicago consistently is the number one and always at the top of that list. Right now, we are the number one, and we've had a great record, actually beating probably the Chicago Bulls run at the top of this scale. But why is that? And I'm going to share 10 reasons that are the core reasons, our strength and how we can compete well as a regional position. So first is that geographical position. It's the time-old story. We're halfway on a continent between Mexico and Canada on a lake that is attached by water to both ends and can also get to nautical pathways for products, et cetera. One surprising thing on geographical location, which is happening more and more, is our weather is a competitive variable that is helping us. So while you may not always enjoy Chicago weather, it is predictable and it's easy to ensure compared to places that are having constant catastrophic events. And that is really becoming a phrase called a weather safe haven, and it's important to us and important to the geography. That location then allows us to have the most intense transportation and logistics infrastructure. Many of you are familiar with the fact that O'Hare is breaking all the records, both for consumers, but also on freight, oftentimes cited as the busiest airport in the country, making us one of the busiest airports in the world. One thing you may not know is that we also have the largest, most productive inland port in the country. So these our attachment to a bimodal system, which basically means goods going on a plane or on a boat and then being transferred to trucks and trains and containers, is one of the best in the country and has been, and it's a constant strength. We have a large and diversified economy. If you took our economy and just looked at it separately, we're larger than Sweden. So we would be in the top 20 economies in the world. We're also extraordinarily diversified. This has a few advantages. One is no single economy, piece of the economy makes up for more than 13% of Chicago. So that means that we really endure hardship well. Something that may happen and hit one industry doesn't hit our entire city. If you're in banking, obviously New York would have certain issues at those moments. If you're in entertainment, LA, technology, San Francisco, we don't have that. That diversification is really part of our risk profile. But what is also great about that, and we find this is even more important when companies are looking for places to move, is that your customers are here. So if you come and you need to sell to farmers, if you need to sell to agrarian companies, if you need to sell to automotive supplies partners, they're here. Many places, if you're doing software, et cetera, you have to get on a plane to talk to your customers. We have all of those industries here, and it's an important part of why we compete well when people are looking at new places. We also have a 5 million member workforce. So if you need a quantum scientist or you need a forklift driver, you're going to be able to find them in Chicago. Almost any profession is available, and we have them in plenitude. That goes to this notion of what we are the U.S. college town. Roughly speaking, about 100 to 140,000, depending on how you look at it, students enter our city every spring upon graduation, and they're absorbed by the economy by this time of the year. So that's why you will see in the newspapers a little blip about unemployment that then tells a story of full employment later on in the year. It's a well-known cycle, but it's also bringing fresh talent into our economy every year. The final one here that is in a quantitative list is affordability. So if I were to quickly say, why do people pick Chicago? Why do companies move here? Why do they grow here? I would say that it has to do with people, place, and power, meaning the employees are here, everything's affordable, rents are affordable compared to other metropolitan areas. The lifestyle you can buy into is incredibly different. And then power. So the extended group of utilities are unbelievably lower price than they are in other major metros. And electric energy provided by nuclear is a big key to that. The next four are categories that I would say are more qualitative. Cultural vibrancy is a big part of Chicago. It's also one that's leading the world. Right now, we like to say everything from presidents to popes and everything dope comes from Chicago. And there's a good case to be made that the six most important artists in six different mediums are living here. You are seeing the books, the magazines, the TV programming, the movies that are all coming out of Chicago, the music, the plays. We are not just another, we are actually leading in a lot of these areas. So vibrancy becomes important. Things like our values, people know that folks work hard in Chicago, they can trust them. We have dedicated civic leadership, which is exactly what we're doing today. We are activating leaders and working together to improve the state of our city and our region. And then finally, the fact that we do work as a group of partners. So we, for example, facilitate economic development with something called the Greater Chicagoland Economic Partnership, which works with all the collar counties to cook. And we work together rather than against each other. We are not trying to compete for companies to move within that group. We are competing as a region against the world. So that brings us to part one of any strategy, identifying your strengths. We spent a lot of time with leadership. We wanted to make sure that that was the right mix. And then we identified industries that we think we have a right to win. Hannah will speak a little bit more about that. Manufacturing, professional services, TD&L, finance, life sciences, digital tech, and AI all probably make immediate sense. The big bets, these are not industries you'd maybe pick just because of their size and job density, but we think they're really important. And then vibrancy is the Chicago story. And we added that. You don't see that very often in economic plans, but we think it's important and goes right to the middle of our character. The recommendations in the strategy, we won't have the chance to go into all of these, but just know we're inviting you to look at the document. We're going to deep dive on the second one. Business attraction and retention in the economic growth is our traditional wheelhouse. We're adding functions around capital recruitment. We have always been incubating and growing ecosystems, but we're going to do it more expansively. A great example of that would be mHub, something that came out of World Business Chicago, is now leading agile manufacturing for the region. Creation of corridors and districts where people can have true expertise on different areas of industries and work together as teams. The next two categories are called future readiness and quality of life. The future readiness is making sure that we have the right workforce for the future, that we preserve our tradition of civic leadership, which is it just came up again and again in every focus group that we had as one of our most important assets, and something that could atrophy if we do not make sure that it's a managed outcome. We are going hard on the ease of doing business. We want Chicagoland to be one of the easiest places to do business. And we have a number of initiatives and open to ideas from everyone on this call for ways we can make that happen. We're going to support infrastructure. The last one is quality of life and promotion, which is vibrancy, and then also marketing our city in ways and trying to change the dialogue. We think if we could, nobody in Chicago wants to be Pollyannish. We don't want to overstate. It's just not our way. But we would like the narrative to catch up with the fact base. And that's going to take some strong marketing and working on the narrative in a conscious way. So with that, I would like to bring in my colleague, Hannah Loftus, to tell us a little bit about the project and how things proceeded.
All right. Thank you, Phil, and the Executives Club for having us today. My name is Hannah Loftus. I lead World Business Chicago's research team, and I also led the development of this Chapter 1 of the Chicago 2050 strategy. I'll spend a few minutes going a little bit deeper into the how, the process and development of this report, including our rationale for doubling down on our priority industries. All right, so at this slide, our strategy released today, it's part 1 of 2. Chapter 1 is a framework and strategy based on our current economy and projections to the future, and it helps World Business Chicago start acting immediately to grow our economy. chapter 2, kind of on that right-hand side, which is launching later this month, is an exercise in visioning out to the future, not based quite so much in data, more in organizing transformative investment around getting big stuff done. It builds off of the framework that we set out in chapter 1. In this chapter 1 development phase or development process, we had 3 phases. We started by looking at the data, like any good strategy. We set a baseline, we identified opportunities, and we started to narrow down those priorities. We pressure tested those findings with industry, civic, and community stakeholders at multiple stages throughout the process. A steering committee of 12 of Chicagoland's economic development leaders helped us set an aspiration and a goal, and helped challenge our analysis and outputs to continue to be bold and to continue to move us in the direction of growth. Over 300 industry leaders helped us identify opportunities and risks within their industries, and later helped us refine objectives and initiatives. Next slide. Thank you. All right. So again, we started this process looking big and reflectively at our economy. We looked at a lot of factors, including population, demographics, workforce, sector level data, and we used leading sources like Moody's Analytics, Lightcast, the US Bureau of Labor Statistics to help us arrive at a lot of different conclusions. And just noting, we looked at data for the Chicago metro area. This allowed us to better look throughout the nation and compare us across the nation. It also recognizes that our economy is truly regional, kind of building off of Phil's mention of the Greater Chicagoland Partnership. We would work collaboratively throughout the region. We looked at key strengths for Chicagoland. Chicagoland's economy, some really impressive numbers. We have an $886 billion economy. We're number 3 in the US by pretty much all metrics: population, GDP, site selection. We've had 700 plus corporate expansion since 2021. We're a super region. We've got 30 Fortune 500 HQs, where 25% of the North America's population is within a day's drive or so. And superlative infrastructure and other assets. We've got a diversified infrastructure, kind of like Phil mentioned, means stability. And then again, which Phil mentioned earlier, we've just got an incredible base of assets from which to grow and to lead from. We also looked at key risks. Oh, go back a little bit. So I'll note our process started in 2024 and continued into 2025. Our economy has changed a lot throughout that entire process. We factored things in like tariffs, reductions in federal funding, kind of into the analysis. We also looked at how COVID changed the way we work and how we do business. We're still at about 60% of pre-COVID office occupancy. And same with our population. We looked at what our population could be in the future and factored that in as why we want to grow and why we want to continue to be the nation's 3rd largest city by, again, all GDP, employment, all those different metrics. Next slide. All right. We started out by prioritizing our industries and developing our strategies around those industries. Our industries were evaluated for economic impact, job density, specialization, and strategic importance. We were identifying where Chicago has a right to win. This was complemented by our qualitative input from our industry leaders. So you see on the slide, pretty simple, but our analysis. We started big and ended up going small. And on the next slide, I'll give you a little bit of a taste of that analysis. This is just one of many analyses we did. I won't go into kind of all the little details, but we started out with the universe of industries in Chicagoland. On this chart in particular, on the y-axis is growth, looking out to 2030. On the x-axis is employment specialization, where are we more specialized than the rest of the US or less specialized? So if you look in the upper right-hand quadrant, you'll see industries by either high growth and high specialization, or kind of, again, in the lower left-hand, lower growth, lower specialization. And the size of the bubble is the size of the economy, or sorry, the size of the industry in Chicagoland. You'll kind of notice, just even visually without digging into it, that you see a lot of the bubbles. The blue bubbles, the light blue at least, are the ones that we ended up focusing on, are kind of towards the right of the screen. We're more specialized in them. A lot of them are also above growth, or again, really big bubbles that are kind of hovering at that growth, like manufacturing. Next slide, please. So that helped us get down to 8 industry sectors, ranging from our core economic strengths to emerging opportunities to vibrancy, which is a collection of industries that makes Chicagoland a great place to live and visit. On this slide, you'll see they're all very large by employment and output. Collectively, they employ about 40% of Chicagoland. You'll also know they're all traded, which means that these industries primarily sell their goods and services outside of the region. So they're all meant to bring new money into the region, new people into the region, help grow the region. Next slide. And again, why these industries? Each met a combination of historic strength, being a historic strength, being an emerging opportunity, or having some other strategic advantage. We want to grow and dominate in all of these industries, or we want to retain these industries, especially as broader industry dynamics shift. For example, manufacturing on one hand is getting more productive, while employment is decreasing slightly. We want to retain that industry and grow it and make it as good as it can be. If they're not historically large industries, we separately identified them by having some other high economic impact, whether that's an employment multiplier, meaning every one job at that industry creates, potentially 18 more jobs downstream. They may have a high R&D spend, or again, are just really emerging opportunities that can put Chicagoland on the map as being the place for that industry, like quantum. Each of these industries is reinforced by already dense ecosystems. For example, Bill mentioned mHub earlier for manufacturing innovation, the IQMP, Illinois Quantum and Microelectronics Park, anchored by PsiQuantum for clean energy and for quantum. Coming up, we'll talk about kind of the WOW corridor for showcasing arts, sports, and tourism. Ultimately, our goal is to build interconnected clusters where proximity drives collaboration, knowledge spills over. A goal here is to take advantage of our strengths so that collectively, with this plan, we have a goal to grow to an economy of $1.04 trillion, up from our about $900 billion right now, and a workforce of 5.05 million people by 2030. So our goal is growth. This is one kind of little sentence from the report. We invent, make, and manage, and have the assets to lead. Chicagoland is that full value chain, and our strategy is meant to recognize what we have. What we have is really strong, and it's meant to act on it. Thank you.
All right. Great. Hannah, thank you so much. I want to call out Hannah because she obviously did an incredible amount of work. And she quoted the report a few times, and I can guarantee you that anything in that report was looked over a good number of times and debated. So every word does matter, and you did a fantastic job. And also a special call out to Tom Ricketts, who was the chairman of this effort, another person who helped a great deal, although there were too many to count and too many to thanks. I am going to just give you a sense of some of the things that are going on, and I'm going to fly through these really quick, but they give you the robustness of investments. So I'd like to start with the red line extension on the far southwest side. If you're thinking about what you've been reading in the paper, this one, as we know, is a little bit challenged at this moment, but most of us are expecting it to come back online. By contrast, the Quantum Shore is a project that is well in motion. For those of you who do not know what quantum is, I can only simply say that people believe that whoever wins in quantum will win. Okay, this is win in military, win in industry, win in military because of encryption and things of that nature. The simplest way I've ever heard it, and it's completely inaccurate in many ways, but just think of the computer that we have on the drawing boards right now. Quantum will work 22,000 times faster than anything that we currently have on the plans, and use a different type of problem solving. So it's parallel processing rather than linear thinking, so it actually will come up with different answers as well. It's super exciting. We couldn't be happier that the United States decided that they were going to win this contest, that if it was going to happen, the governor of Illinois decided it should be in Illinois, that Cook County, that the mayor of Chicago also decided that has to happen in Chicagoland, and all the way down to the aldermen and block by block. This is a great example of government, all levels of government working together with passion to make a great outcome. And that's one of the things that's happening here in town, which I think is just fantastic. SDI Presence is another project as we go north, where they're onshoring IT projects and employing locals from the neighborhood. We have the Obama Presidential Center. Literally, when we go to trade shows where we're talking about cities and people are looking at cities, the Obama Presidential Center has people lined up around the block. They want to capture a little bit of that magic. They're building hotels and restaurants in the neighborhood. Lots of capital flowing in. Healthcare also, as you start to see these investments of one nature, you start to see investments of related industries, and it's really kind of turning the tide. The Chicago Fire announcement, I think today there was some news about just how big that project's going to be and how engendered it is into the neighborhood, and bringing a lot of attention to the global sport of soccer here in Chicago. We're very excited about that. The 1901 project, another one where the Wirtz family and the Reinsdorf family have decided to do a major development, putting in tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars into development into that neighborhood. The Google, we're actually, that's the building across the street, watching that come up and come alive. Private development again. And Google is just really excited about being in Chicago. Their employees, they always do an employee survey. They tell us that their employees want to be in Chicago and that they want mass transit. What would be better than being in Chicago on top of 6 different train lines that are at the bottom of Google? David Byrne just announced that rather than doing a concert, he's doing a permanent exhibit here in the Britannica building with the Goodman Theater. That's an exciting trend in what we call these wow experiences that are coming in. The Hand in the Eye will be the global head of magic. It's a magical experience. They're training magicians. They've got the 10 top magicians in the world as their board, and they're basically changing the scope of that activity in the US. Magical Harry Potter as well. I like the next two here. Sorry, Harry Potter and Universal, which we'll talk about in a second, because these are companies that have highly dedicated expertise in picking places to put businesses. And they want to put these wow experiences in Chicago for a reason, because they expect that our population will engage and they'll get a high return. Navy Pier is doing unbelievable upgrades and more coming. I think there's exciting news in the future on Navy Pier. I mentioned Universal. 40 tens of millions of dollars going into the top of the Hancock building to make that a reestablished tradition in everybody's life to go to the top of that building. And then, of course, we know about what's going on at O'Hare. So there is capital flowing in, and that's an important thing to know. And one of the things that gives us optimism, this is just private industry doing what it does best, which is build when it expects a return. But we are doing some things to enhance that effort. And my colleague, he always laughs when I say this, the hardest working man in economic development, but he is out there and lifting our efforts all the time. So Charles, I think you are going to share a little bit more on Shy Forward now.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Phil. So my name is Charles Smith, and I have the pleasure of serving as Vice Chair of World Business Chicago under the leadership of Mayor Brandon Johnson. Before we dig into Shy Forward, I want to thank our board, our executive committee, Phil and his staff. Collectively, they have done just an amazing job. I also want to thank the Executives Club, my friend Dory, which is one of the most inclusive civic organizations in the city. Our collaboration and partnership means so much. Lastly, I want to thank the mayor, Deputy Mayor Kenyon Merritt, Budget Director Annette Guzman for their ongoing commitment to economic growth in Chicago. So approximately 20 months ago, when named Vice Chair of WBC, the first thing I did was listen to our board, our staff, past leadership, and civic partners to really dig into the programmatic aspect of the organization. What I learned was fascinating. WBC has done a great job of continuity and adding relevant, timely programming. One example of that has continued to last is Mark Tebby and what he has done and still able to do regarding the tech ecosystem that continues to thrive at WBC. As that assessment continued, Phil came up with this wonderful idea, don't ask me how, of Chicago 2050, which really gave us a blueprint to work and focus. While Phil was working diligently on that plan, we had a few opportunities to travel nationally and internationally. These are fascinating trips. During these trips, there was so much interest and intrigue in Chicago. Being a Chicago native, I find myself a bit biased, but part of what I learned is that Chicago was not, or is not well defined nationally or internationally. And the media, for whatever reason, does not seem to consistently do us any favors. One of our greatest strengths, which I think is a superpower, Phil and both Hannah mentioned, is that we have the most diverse economy in the country. But that still doesn't leave us well defined. Most major cities are defined by a dominant industry or category. Some of the easier examples are LA with Hollywood, New York, finance, fashion, Vegas, entertainment, Miami, and so forth. But what has proven itself over and over again is that when we start to talk about things such as being the best big city in the US the 9th year in a row by Condé Nast, and also corporate relocations for 12 years in a row, we are really educating the public on our city. Most people don't know those stats or those facts. When you add in the things that have happened over the past 2 years in development that Phil mentioned, transportation, vibrancy, sport, quantum, people really get excited. And when we actually get people to visit during events like the DNC, Lollapalooza, people literally get hooked. So Shy Forward is a strategic economic growth initiative. It's really designed to attract more capital to Chicago in a proactive way, utilizing our current assets, potential growth opportunities, national and international connectivity. Now, I want to be clear. This is not a replacement program. It's an enhancement. Our public-private partnership with the city has been successful and is as strong as it's ever been. And there are numerous partners, organizations, and businesses that lean into this work every single day. We want to be a part of that. We also have a tremendous amount of national and international connectivity. We have the largest number of sister cities around the world, which is why Shy Forward has contemplated locations for national satellite hubs as well as international satellite hubs starting in possibly DC. Shy Forward is a plan to impact and perhaps change the narrative. I'm a true believer in personal communication. The more people we can see and touch, the better chance you have for success. Increasing engagement, we hope, will accelerate deal flow. This is also a signal coordinator that we are organized, focused, and ready to compete. We think we can broaden the impact on high potential opportunities across neighborhoods and industrial corridors and help to define Chicago. We also think we can find some efficiencies and be better partners to our local investors and abroad. So next, I'm going to briefly get into how and what our process is. First, we'll work to create a Chicago investment prospectus. It's a living portfolio that will present development opportunities in a clear, actionable, investor-ready format. Venture capital and private equity firms raise billions with similar pitch decks. It's time our global city has one of its own. Second, it will speed up deal making by connecting vetted, high potential projects with investors who can move quickly and who might otherwise look past Chicago. We'll help those investors and developers navigate regulations and build lasting local relationships. These are some of the things that we do right now. We get a tremendous amount of intake. What we'd like to do is be more aggressive and proactive and form a portfolio of investors as well. Third, we want to widen the circle. Steering investment not only into marquee downtown projects, but into transformative opportunities in neighborhoods across the city. There are so many stories in neighborhoods across our city that sometimes are overlooked. It is very important to WBC, the mayor's office, and all of our civic organizations to continue to support these small businesses and these grand plans. So the invitation is simple. If you're an investor looking for opportunities with reliable and attractive return and real industries, Shy Forward is your front door to Chicago. If you're a developer or company with bold ideas, Shy Forward can potentially help make them investable and visible to the right partners. With that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Dory. I know we have a question and answer session, and I want to make sure I was efficient, brief, and it made sense.
All of you all were wonderful, Charles. So you understood the assignment and you accomplished it. So there's already questions coming in, and I'll remind folks, if you want to use the Q&A, we'll get to those questions along with my questions. And I think we're already on it. So Timothy just asked probably Tim, I'm sorry, Timothy, if I sounded like your mom or something, I'm sorry about that. But you asked the question about Shy Forward, and I think Charles just answered that. So we'll go from there. But I'll start off with Phil. And Charles, you kind of hit on this as you mentioned how we're going to get this thing done. So Phil, as you think about Chicago 2050, how do we reimagine what leadership, investment, and inclusion looks like over these next 25 years to get this Chicago 2050 done?
Well, the first thing was, we noticed quickly as we said, what should Chicago look like in the year 2050? That it was really two questions. There's just things are moving at such a pace that we couldn't get people to think about this year's economy, next year's economy, and think about kind of that Burnham, what stirs your soul when you think about Chicago, truly being a city by the lake, truly being an equitable city, truly maybe a sustainable city and a leader in some of the areas, continuing to be a leader in architecture. What does that look like? So that's why we are breaking this into two different efforts. And part one here is kind of the nuts and bolts of a short-term economic plan. And we are just launching part two, which is that envisioning, literally the part that stirs everyone's soul on where can Chicago go over the long run. Both consistently came back to the notion that we need that civic involvement. It is, when you talk to anybody in other cities that has spent any time in Chicago, they will start on that immediately, right? They'll just say, it is an obvious difference. In Chicago, everybody's willing to lend a hand. They're not only out for their business, they're out for the person next to them and their business. And I think to really take full advantage of that civic engagement and ability, you have to have a plan. And you have to have areas that you're resourcing and areas that you're prioritizing. And so hopefully we will be having that conversation about what's the vision, what are we excited about, what can we get done over the long term, while we make sure that we're taking the right economic steps over the next 5 years and assuring that leaders are engaged and doing what they can to help. And none of it's going to be easy, and this is not a recipe that if you break 4 eggs, put it in the oven for an hour and a half, voila, we've got a done economy. These are guiding principles and guardrails for how we put our attention and energies.
No, I love that, Phil, particularly because I can't cook. So if you tell me to take 4 eggs, I'm gonna be like, what? And so I appreciate that this isn't prescriptive, that this is really about what are those guiding principles? How do we organize all the assets? And I appreciate so much, Hannah, the work that you all did to really identify those, because we talk about this Chicago way of things, but I think the Chicago 2050 really leans into the definition of those elements of Chicago. Hannah, I saw you come off mute.
No, I was just going to agree. I think it was an exercise in defining what are these industries and what are our strengths and what can we really lead in and funnel more investment into, really.
Yeah.
It was a great part of it, this whole entire process.
So Charles, I so appreciate, I know you are the hardest working man in economic development. So that is just that's a fact, Phil. That's not just rumors, that's a fact. And so, but I really appreciate how we're thinking about Chicago as an economic entity that needs to be invested in. Therefore, let's put a prospectus together. I think that's amazing and such in my opinion, at least, a very innovative way of thinking about it. But as you think about this sort of approach, what types of projects that you think Shy Forward will focus on? Is it just new development, or does it include existing companies or other civic initiatives? Give us a sense of the types of projects that Shy Forward will be considering as they think about this investment strategy.
Well, the best part about Shy Forward is that it is a program that we're able to adjust quickly. We are very interested in the needs of investors and what they're interested in. So this is sort of like a matchmaking process as well. But there's so much opportunity in Chicago. What I mentioned was we also want to be a better partner to some of our developers today. You look at the 78 and what is happening with the Chicago fire. We still have this huge swath of land at Michael Reese. So there's so many different things that we could do there. We want to partner on projects such as those. But also, when you think about some of our infrastructure, our Asian infrastructure, you look at LaSalle Reimagine and some of these conversions. I think we're fourth in the nation in these conversions. What people don't know is the city's investment in LaSalle Street Reimagine has triggered about 15 more private investments on conversions around the city. Which is important to note. But we also have issues with infrastructure and transportation around the museum campus in Soldier Field. There has to be solutions. I tell this story. I was at my office at 150 North Michigan, and I was going to a soccer game courtesy of Phil inviting me. And it took me 50 minutes to get to Soldier Field. So those are things that we think about as ambitious projects that we may be able to help solve for. Those are just some examples. And obviously, you have so many examples in our neighborhoods. You talk about affordability in our neighborhoods and sort of rebuilding the block. There are community-based projects that we're very interested in. We've been talking about this Shy Forward for probably a little over a year. I've probably driven people nuts about it. So we're really excited about it. But as we develop this portfolio, we want to make sure it's developed in a very balanced way where it really impacts Chicagoans, not just downtown, but our neighborhoods as well.
No, I love that, Charles. What I again appreciate the comprehensive view of the city, right? So we have all these different types of projects going on, as well as ensuring that there's no one favorite place, that they're looking more cohesively around what pieces of it can come together. So I love that approach. So Sydney Diller is asking a great question here, and I'll put it out there. I got a feeling, Charles, you should lean into this, but what is an estimate of the investment dollars that the city of Chicago will need to put into realizing this overall strategy, and how will the city anticipate paying for a given ongoing budget challenges? So I think that's a combination of the folks on the panel.
Yep. So first, what I like to say is that the city has been an amazing partner for World Business Chicago. We're an organization that's been around for over 25 years. So from mayor to mayor, CEO to CEO, we have, I think, the best public-private partnership. The second thing I like to say is our board members are amazing. So we have just over 100 board members, where when we look at our WBC resources, we want to make sure we maximize those resources. So for us, what we've started to put together is our perspective, but a hiring plan and figuring out how we allocate resources amongst our different departments and how we attract more investment into the city from other entities as well. So we sort of, like, Executives Club is a wonderful partner of World Business Chicago. For us, highlighting our partnership always brings value, and more board members as well. So as we sort of figure this out, we'll be dedicating certain resources to Shy Forward, but we don't want those resources to impact our brand and what we're currently doing at WBC.
I think there's another way of looking at that question as well, which would be, what would the city have to invest to maintain our number 3 position over the years? What needs to be invested to hit the 1.4 trillion and growing that 5 million person workforce to a place that we maintain leadership? And the fundamental idea here is that the city actually only ends up benefiting from that from a tax base. That what we're doing is getting the free market, getting capital to invest, experience returns, to grow the Chicago economy in that way. So World Business Chicago fundamentally works with the idea that a bigger, stronger economy solves all problems. And I don't mean to say that naively, but what you do need is a larger productive tax base and jobs for everyone. And most of the things that we worry about can go away if our economy is growing.
So Phil, just to piggyback on that too. So I kind of interpreted Sydney's question as, is there a target dollar amount? Are we saying Chicago 2050 is a $1 billion effort or $2 billion effort? It doesn't sound like there's a specific dollar amount. It does sound like it's going to be sort of project understanding the different opportunities to invest in different ways. So there isn't sort of a target investment number.
That is correct, and as you might imagine, there's been a lot of discussion on that. I think there's small projects that have really important impact and yield, and then there's larger projects that would hit some big dollar numbers. We're gonna look at every one of them independently. So we haven't put a target exactly on the investment dollars.
Great. And I have a comment here from Mr. Andrew Hayes that and I was going to announce this, but I'll announce it now just in case there's folks on the call that have to drop. But the plan is available for your review. So you can take a look at worldbusinesschicago.com. And if you look and just hit Chicago 2050, you can see the plan and start looking at, I should call it playbook versus a plan. I like that. So thank you for that. So there's a question. First of all, thank you all. These questions are really good questions, and I'll get back to my questions in a minute, but the ones coming in are also good. But there's a statement here from an anonymous attendee, but they're excited to hear about quantum. So are Fermi Labs and Argonne involved as well? And could you share more about any clean energy projects?
Sure. So, Fermi and Argonne are one of the reasons quantum is here. That the reliance on that deep intellectual capability, the research, the scientists, et cetera, was really a big part of drawing particularly PsiQuantum, which was the original tenant to the campus. So yeah, they're deeply involved, and yeah, I would say that they've all got their immediate plans, their 5-year plans, and their 10-year plan. And deepening their relationships with everyone from, companies that are looking at solving cancer with new computing abilities to the Department of Defense. So it's a really important on-ramp for those institutions. And I safely say if they weren't involved, the quantum campus wouldn't be here. And so it's a big. Clean energy is another one, and clean energy has so many different dimensions. Oftentimes that can be a code word for nuclear power, because it is a clean energy source, and that's a really important piece of why we are successful. Right now, Illinois is an exporter of energy, and while demand is expanding at a rate that will not allow that to always be the case, right now we're in a good state. So we just got to keep that up, and that also means adding wind and other alternatives at a much more rapid rate than we currently are. And so I think you're going to hear from us additional specific initiatives that are focused on bringing that dialogue here and leading that dialogue here. We've already got a lot of scattered capability, Invenergy being here in downtown Chicago being a huge win from that perspective. But expect to hear a lot more. And that's part of the virtuous cycle that we're talking about with Shy Forward, because as the capital comes in, it will help clean energy. It will help electric vehicles. It will help vibrancy industries, et cetera. And it will help housing. So it's kind of the one tool that will fuel the other industries.
Wonderful. There are great questions coming in. And I know we only have 5 minutes left, so I probably can only take a couple more questions before I wrap us up. But know that, Hannah, I'm already putting out there, when you get ready for part 2 of this, let us be the place that we go to announce that part 2, because clearly there's a lot of interest in this topic. So there's a question here from John Hulton. In a competitive national landscape, what specific gaps in Chicago's workforce ecosystem must be addressed through strategic investment and innovation to significantly enhance its attractiveness and unique appeal for business growth? And how does those efforts support growth in all areas of the city? Great question, John. Thank you.
Yeah.
There's a lot there. So answer what you heard.
There is. I probably can have one quick answer, and Hannah, I bet, has
Yeah, I've got a couple. Yeah.
one to say as well. Look, generally speaking, we have the right size of workforce. And the mismatch between people and needs is not as severe as the problem has been of finding the right person. So there's a huge cost of information problem we have out there from an economist perspective, where there are people with the skills looking for a job, and there are people that have a job and are looking to hire, and they're not finding each other. So that is probably the biggest problem that we've got. Then you can go across every industry and you'll find micro markets. One that I find particularly fascinating, and it goes back into our vibrancy, and it's related to the healthcare, which is consumer healthcare. We have a lot of folks that are interested in that industry. There is a gap that we could use, innovation, training, et cetera, where people need the help to get qualified for the jobs that are being offered in that space. And that just has a huge impact for us in well-being if we can figure out how to do that systematically. But I'll turn it over to Hannah, who spends a lot of time thinking about just this topic.
I was going to say just two quick ones. One is kind of gap in the workforce ecosystem, brain train, making sure that we retain our high quality talent who are educated at our large institutions, creating a value proposition for, top quantum scientists to stay in Chicago. I think that's one. I think the other one is that we have an opportunity as well is identifying the skills of the future across all different, your grad degrees down to your apprenticeships. What are the skills of the future, and how can we help identify them to plug them back into our really broad workforce ecosystem in Chicagoland?
If
Yeah.
we
Oh, go
have
ahead,
time
Phil.
for one other trend that is, alarming. One of the things that we love in economic growth is population growth. It's always been a perfect correlation. It is not so much perfect now, but it is still a correlated function, meaning that, headcount, you can't necessarily rely on a certain amount of economic growth, but they do tend to be associated with each other. We have the largest group that is leaving Chicago are Blacks on the south and west side of medium incomes. And so one of the workforce issues that we need is to make sure that that community feels like there's economic opportunity in their neighborhoods or in Chicago that gets them to stay. And, the other groups that leave are kind of leaving at the same pace that they always did. And, it's not hard to understand that people that are affluent start to spend winters in warmer places in Chicago, and they've been doing that for 80 years, and they're doing it at the same rate that they used to. But that departure of that specific demographic is the biggest drain that we have in our population.
Well, I want to add to that, Phil. I'm glad you mentioned that because, this talks about the importance of sort of those gaps. And the One Summer Chicago Jobs Program sort of targets some of these young professionals and younger individuals that want to be engaged in a broader ecosystem and the workforce. And the strategic approach to grow that program, I think, actually makes a big impact when you talk about future jobs and workforce development for the city of Chicago. That is a program we stay very close to, and our board stays close to as well.
Okay, you guys are phenomenal. And if we had another hour, I could get through the rest of the questions that kept coming in. So two things. I am so sorry I have to wrap us up. This has been a wonderful conversation and more to come. You can access the Chicago 2050 playbook on the worldbusinesschicago.com website. As well as we'll be sending it to the registrants on this as well. But I want to thank everyone for attending. And I'm so sorry, Rupali, Rob, Jack, Blue, that I didn't get to all of your questions. Please keep them coming. Send me a personal email so we can keep following up with the content, because clearly there's such a strong interest in what you all have presented, and we want to make sure that we continue to give people great information. A couple things for the folks that are on this call. My presumption is that you like hearing about the economic development that's happening in Chicago. So we have a couple Executive Club of Chicago events coming up. One, just next Tuesday, we're going to partner with Deloitte to do From Cards to Confidence, how holiday spending shapes the economic outlook. So just in time for the holiday season, we'll have some economic data on that. And then our annual economic outlook is coming up on January 13th. Then in February, Phil is coming back to hang with us as we talk about the soul of Chicago, the future called We're Up. So we'll have the mayor will provide remarks, as well as Charles mentioned, Deputy Mayor Kenya Merritt, Choose Chicago's Kristen Reynolds, and of course our own Phil right here will come back and share some additional thoughts around how we continue to drive economic development and really co-create the Chicago of tomorrow. So with that, I appreciate everyone joining us this afternoon. And you heard it here. I love it. I'm like, a new t-shirt coming our way. Presidents, popes, and everything dope. From our friend Dilla, right? Presidents, popes, and everything dope about America comes from Chicago. So we are excited. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Charles, for your brilliance and allowing us to start to share this information, but trust more to come on that. And we'll definitely continue to, gain insights and appreciate everyone taking time with us this afternoon. Have a wonderful rest of the week and enjoy our beautiful Chicago predictable weather.
Thank you so much.